Hello guys and welcome back. This is the nutrient description series and this is the last video. We are going to talk about minerals in this video. So let's begin. Okay, so today we are going to talk about minerals. Minerals are non-energetic micronutrients with plastic and regulatory function. The absorption of minerals is intraluminal and the translocation and mobility to blood. The elimination of minerals is mainly through blood, in the urine, and in the bile, some of them. We can classify the minerals as microelements, electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chlorine, and plastic, calcium, phosphorus, and magnesium. Microelements are organic, which are the iron and the iodine, and the metal enzymes, the copper, the zinc, the selenium, the magnesium, and the chromium. So let's begin with the electrolytes. And if we talk about electrolytes, we need to talk about water as well. So water first. Water is a non-energetic macronutrient with plastic and regulatory function. If we want to calculate how much water we need to consume in a day, we will need to multiply our body weight in kilos per 35 and we will get the milliliters. Water and beverages are the main sources of water we can get straight from water, the beverages, and food. And oxidative reactions inside our body can also give us some water. If we have a negative balance of water, we are dehydrated. And if we have a positive balance, we have the rehydration. But if it is too much, we can suffer from possible edemas. Now, let's begin with the electrolytes. Sodium and potassium. They are absorbed by simple diffusion and they can enter the blood. Sodium is the interstitial liquid and potassium is the intracellular liquid. The excretion is through urine mainly and the non-absorbed through feces. The natremia is 140 millimolars and the potassemia is 4 millimolars. So we have a lot of sodium. And the vegetables are the best way to get the ratio, the correct ratio. We have in our body the renin, angiostensin, aldosterone. This is a very important regulation of hormones which are going to indeed regulate the natremia. If sodium is low, natremia low, they will activate the sodium reabsorption, the first inhibition, so we do not ingest water, and the vasoconstriction. Sodium is extracellular and is 90% of the extracellular cations. It is an electrolyte, of course, and it participates in the sodium-potassium pump. Very important mechanism in the whole body. It has a high homeostatic control, and high sodium may cause arterial hypertension. The RDA says 6 grams of salt a day, max. Potassium, on the other hand, is an intracellular cation. It's hypotensive, so if we have problems with hypertension, if we take potassium, it will lower that hypertension because it's promoting the sodium elimination. Hypokalemia is due to diarrhea, vomits, maybe too much exercise, or the Cushing disease. Indeed, if we lose water, we will probably lose some electrolytes as well. Hyperkalemia, on the other hand, is due to necrosis, renal failure, and diuretics. The quantities of potassium for a person who weighs 70 kilos is approximately 150. This is milligrams. Okay, then we have the plastic elements. The calcium first. Calcium is the major element we have the major mineral we have. It's 40% of all minerals, and it's 1.2 kilos in a body approximately. It has plastic function as hard tissues for bones and teeth, regulatory as an electrolyte in some cases, and then muscle contraction, coagulation of course, and then metabolism. Calcemia is controlled by PTH and vitamin D, as we talked about in the vitamin D video, the fat-soluble vitamins video. Calcium is absorbed by active transportation or simple diffusion, and it has an absorption of the 30% in the blood, then can travel free or bound to plasmatic proteins. The concentration in the blood is 10 milligrams per deciliter, and then it can go to the bones and teeth as 99%, and the rest is going to help the muscle contraction and the coagulation and the metabolism, and then the rest is eliminated through urine and feces. We have to mention that we have some variables that can improve the absorption of calcium, which are the ratio with the phosphorus and the vitamin D as well, and protein ingestion. And these are inhibitors of the absorption. They lower the absorption, the phytates, the oxalates, too much fiber, aging, and drugs. Recommendation is 1 gram a day in adults, and same as vitamin D deficiency. A deficiency can cause bone problems, muscle problems, and hypertension problems. The toxicity is the same as vitamin D, but it's very rare. We can find calcium in dairy, fish, seafood, and in brassicas, but they are also high in oxalates, which is an inhibitor of the absorption, sesame seeds, legumes, nuts, and citric fruits. If we continue, we have phosphorus, which we have 800 grams in the body, and it's part of the hard tissues in an 80%. It has plastic and regulatory functions. The plastic are the hard tissues, bones and teeth, together with the calcium, and regulatory as an electrolyte for buffers to maintain the correct pH, and in the metabolism as well. All the phosphatases and phosphorylation of proteins and ATP, all the stuff requires phosphorus. The RDA says 700 milligrams a day. The deficiency is rare, and the toxicity may be due to the kidney problems, and they can create kidney stones via high phosphorus and low calcium diet, or nutritional hyperparathyroidism, because this is also connected to vitamin D, as we talked in the fat-soluble vitamins video. We can find phosphorus in dairy, eggs, fish, and meat, and the vegetables contain less quantities. And we find high amounts in additives. Then we have magnesium, which is 60% of hard tissues. Plastic function, well, hard tissues, as I said, but it's as a reservoir of bones and teeth. The other ones were for creating hydroxyapatite. Regulatory, well, it can go as an electrolyte, as a muscle recovery, and in the metabolism as well. It's an intracellular cation. RDA says 320 to 420 milligrams a day. The deficiency creates kidney stones, muscle spasms, hypertension, and general tiredness. It's very, very important for muscle, this one. We say that the phytates, the oxalates, the fiber, and also the calcium and drugs can lower the absorption of magnesium. And we have to say that this is the exception, because the majority of the elimination of magnesium is through feces. We find magnesium in whole grains, legumes, nuts. Leafy greens have a ton of magnesium, and is lower in animals. And then we have chlorine for the tooth enamel. Plastic function protects the teeth from decay, because Sugar is fermented to lactic acid. This will lower the pH of the mouth, causing corrosion of the enamel. And fluorine is there to prevent that, to protect the teeth. As fluorine can be found in water with a concentration of less than 0.8 milligrams per liter will give us cavities because we don't have enough fluorine. But if the water has too much of it, we will develop the dental fluorosis, which is even worse. We can find fluorine, as I said, in water, in fish and seafood, and the liver, and in some tea. Moving on, we have the organic elements, which are iron and iodine. Iron is very important for hemoglobin and myoglobin. The functions, well, hemoglobin in blood and myoglobin in the muscle. We have the iron as the hemo group in both of them, and the active form, which transports the oxygen, is the 2 form. The free form is the meta, which is inactive, and it forms the brown color of the meat when it's left in the fridge for days. And the ceruloplasmin is involved in this process. Then it can also function as a metal enzyme in oxidative phosphorylation, as FAD, Krebs cycle. The iron is also involved in purines and catecholamines metabolism, in detox processes and immune response. So as you can see, iron is very, very important. Active iron in muscles, lungs and bone marrow. Iron reservoir, we have it in liver, in the enterocytes and blood vessels. As we are going to see now, we have inorganic iron that can enter the enterocyte using facilitated diffusion. On the other hand, the iron emo, which is indeed the effective one, the more effective one, the more bioavailable one, which we will find in animal products, enters the enterocytes via vesiculosis. And then once they are in, the inorganic iron is iron 2, and the emo enters and has to be converted into iron 2, and the bilirubin is released. Iron 2 can either be converted in iron 3 and bind to the ferritin to be stored as a reservoir in the enterocytes, or it can cross the barrier and get inside the blood using active transportation. Inside the blood, it travels bound to the transferrin. Here again we have some molecules that will enhance the absorption only on the inorganic iron. Vitamin C, the reducing sugars, and the proteins which contain sulfur. And we have molecules that lower the absorption, which are the phytic acid, the fiber, the tannins, and the oxalates. These are called antinutrients. Recommendations of iron 8 to 18 milligrams a day. Iron deficiency causes anemia, and toxicity causes hemochromatosis. We can find iron in the liver mainly, in the kidneys, in the red meat, oily fishes and seafood, and then in the vegetables, in the soy, legumes, sesame seeds, whole grains, nuts, watercress and spinach. Iodine, thyroid hormones T3 and T4. They function as basal metabolism regulation for aerobic respiration of the fatty acids and heat production in the electron transport chain. These hormones are hyperglycemic, which means they increase the blood glucose levels, and they reduce the HMG reductase, which is an enzyme that is used for the cholesterol synthesis. The FDA says 150 micrograms a day. The deficiency causes hypothyroidism, which means endemic goiter, and genetic and dietary factors are involved to that. Low quantities of iodine and create a lot of mucinogenic substances that can create the thiosinate and the thiocyanate confuses the thyroid. This confusion can create the cretinism and the myxedema. Toxicity of the iodine causes the hyperthyroidism and the Graves' disease. We can find iodine in iodized salt, seafood, dairy, meats and eggs, and fruit and veggies. And then we have the metal enzymes elements. Zinc, 1.5 to 2.5 grams in the body. It's a cofactor of more than 300 enzymes: protein synthesis, carboxypeptidase, alcohol dehydrogenase, alkaline phosphatase, pyruvate carboxylase, carbon anhydrase, retinol dehydrogenase, and superoxide dismutase in the cytoplasm. The absorption is via facilitated diffusion and simple diffusion with an efficiency of 25 to 50%. Again, amino acids, sugars, lactose mainly, and citrate will stimulate the absorption, and these molecules, the phytates, the fiber, the oxalates, the tannins, the too much alcohol, even iron, the copper, and the calcium will inhibit it. It has a reservoir in the enterocytes as well as iron. It uses active transportation to reach the bloodstream, in where travels bound to albumins or transferrin as well as the iron. And then it goes to the muscles in 30%, to the bones in 60%, and the excretion is through the bile and indeed with the feces. Recommended doses 15 milligrams a day. Various deficiency reasons. It lowers growth, the taste changes, and we can experience nerve disorders and immunosuppression in the worst case scenario. And it has no toxicity proven. We can find zinc in seafood and fish, a lot in seafood, meats and eggs, milk and dairy, whole grains, legumes and nuts. And then we have copper, 50 to 120 grams in the body. Superoxide dismutase in the cytoplasm as well as zinc. Cytochrome C oxidase in the electron transport chain. Collagen synthesis, ceruloplasmin, and various enzymes. The absorption 40 to 60%. We use the simple diffusion and active transportation. This is to enter the enterocyte, this is to leave it. And it can stay in the enterocytes with the metallothioneins. It goes to the blood, as I said, with active transportation, and it travels bound to albumins or transcuprin. It can enter the liver, in which there is a reservoir with metallothioneins, and it can go to the tissues with the ceruloplasmin. The excretion is in the feces using the bile. The RDA says 0.9 milligrams a day. The deficiency is similar to Manganese disease, and toxicity causes the Wilson disease. We can find the copper in fish, seafood, liver, and meats, in whole grains, legumes, nuts, mushrooms, and cocoa. And then we have manganese, 10 to 20 grams in the body. This value is starting to go down. Superoxide dismutase, again, but in the mitochondrion. Then pyruvate carboxylase for gluconeogenesis, acetyl-CoA carboxylase for fat synthesis, isocitrate dehydrogenase in the Krebs cycle, collagen and bone synthesis, melanin and urea produce. So, manganese is bound in the food to proteins, and we need peptidases to free it. And then, once it's free, it goes inside the enterocyte with facilitated diffusion, and it leaves the enterocytes with active transportation. In the blood, it's bound to albumins, and it goes to the liver, where it is bound to transferrin or transmanganin, the manganese-free positive. And then it can also go to the tissues, and the excretion is through bile to feces. The RDA says 1.8 to 2.3 milligrams a day. The deficiency is rare because of magnesium. Magnesium can replace the role of manganese. It causes degenerative diseases, glycemia, bone and reproductive problems, and there is no dietary toxicity, only respiratory one. The manganese, we find it in whole grains, legumes and nuts, tubers, coffee, tea, and leafy greens. Then we have the molybdenum, 6 to 16 grams in the body. It's involved in the xanthine dehydrogenase oxidase for the uric acid production. I talked about uric acid production and this specific enzyme in the metabolism series of videos. Then it's involved in the aldehyde oxidase, which creates the catecholamines, in the sulfate oxidase for the production of urine from sulfuric amino acids. The absorption is via active transportation or facilitated diffusion when we have high amounts. The 90% of the molybdenum is absorbed. Once in the blood, it travels inside the erythrocytes. And then it can go to the liver, to the kidney, to the bone, and to the skin. The excretion is mainly through the urine. The RDA says 45 micrograms a day, and the deficiency is associated to selenium deficiency as well. The toxicity is not common in the gout. Whole grains, legumes and nuts are the main sources of molybdenum. Then we have selenium, one of my favorites, 3 to 15 grams in the body. It's involved in the glutathione peroxidase. This is the most powerful antioxidant we have, the glutathione. And it's also involved in the type 1 tetraiodothyronine deiodinase, which converts the T4 to the T3, which are thyroid hormones. It's bound to amino acids, so the absorption is as amino acid. Indeed, we find selenium bound to selenocysteine and methionine as selenomethionine. So, do you remember how we absorb amino acids? Using active transportation, and they enter the enterocytes, and then they go to the blood, and they travel together with the erythrocytes in this case, and with the selenoprotein P. They go to the liver, where they suffer the metabolization, they free the selenium, and then the selenium can go to the bone, to the muscle, to the kidneys and spleen. The excretion is through bile and urine, both. The RDA says 55 micrograms a day. It has a bimodal effect, which means that deficiency is harmful, but toxicity as well. And it's very easy to go from deficiency to toxicity because there is not a very big range. The deficiency causes the Cashin and Cashin-Beck disease. The adequate quantities of selenium actually prevent the diseases, and the toxicity, well, the seleniosis. Fish and seafood are the main sources of selenium, as well as eggs, meats and liver, milk and dairy, and then we have whole grains, nuts, the Brazil nuts especially, they have a lot of selenium, mushrooms and garlic. And then we have chromium, 4 to 6 grams in the body. This is not a metal enzyme. It's a glucose tolerance factor. And it has two types. One which is toxic, the chromium 6, and one which is a nutrient, the chromium 3. It's actually involved in the nicotinic acid and in the insulic anabolic effect. So, the absorption, chromium 3 is absorbed via facilitated diffusion, and we have to mention that ascorbate and oxalate facilitates, which is very rare that oxalate facilitates an absorption. This is the only exception, and in this case sugar inhibits its absorption, which is again an exception because the sugar tends to enter the enterocytes together with minerals, but in this case inhibits the absorption of chromium. Once inside the blood, they are bound to the plasmatic proteins to travel through the bloodstream, and then in the liver they are stored as a reservoir. And the excretion is through the urine, renal excretion. Recommended doses 25 to 35 micrograms a day. The deficiency causes insulin problems because of this, and the toxicity can only be found with chromium 6. We can find chromium in meat, liver, fish and seafood and dairy, in yeasts, whole grains, nuts, chocolate, coffee, tea, and mushrooms. Okay, and that's it for the minerals description, and that's it as well for the nutrient description series of videos. I hope you liked it, and if you did, share this playlist to friends and family to help them and to help me as well. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, like the video, comment down below if you have any doubts, and download these diagrams I'm doing. They are on my website, they are free, you only have to go there and ask for them. Thank you very much for watching and see you soon. Hope you enjoyed.